We do not live in an age when politicians are much admired. We assume politicians from all political parties to be inherently untrustworthy. Who in his right mind, after all, would voluntarily submit to the public scrutiny and the never-ending quest for money? Who would sacrifice peace of mind and a respect for the facts in a context of electoral politics, where elections are won as a result of giant war chests, and where a contentious public, that's ourselves, does not want to hear what it does not already believe, and resists the hard and complex truths that we as a nation need to confront? Ironically, it is in such a bleak landscape that we need inspired and enlightened political leaders who, after winning elections, take risks and speak their mind. Our speaker today is such a leader. Educated at Stanford, Oxford, and Yale, he chose a path of public service. He has fearlessly fought to improve the lot of our most disadvantaged citizens. He has tackled corruption and neglect and pioneered to rebuild the economy, housing, and education in Newark. Bard is particularly proud that through his leadership, the third public Bard High School Early College was founded in Newark this past fall. With us today are the school's leaders, Ray Peterson, our own alumnus, Demaine Williams, Lori Ween, and John Weinstein. I would like them to stand to accept our thanks as a gesture. Our thanks is a gesture of gratitude to our speaker and his leadership. Last but not least, politicians are known to excel at exhorting others to have courage. Rarely does their character as individuals match that rhetoric. Last April, our speaker demonstrated that his courage and character are not a mere function of belief, but inform what he does and who he is as a private citizen when no one is looking. He risked his life to rescue a neighbor from a burning building. In a poignant tribute to historic symmetries, it is an honor to ask you to join me on the 50th anniversary of a Bard commencement at which Martin Luther King was the commencement speaker, to welcome Mayor Cory Booker of Newark as the 2012 commencement speaker.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, it's a long afternoon. Sit down, please. You're all trying to get me all misty before I've even begun speaking. Please forgive me if it sounds immodest, but I've got to a point in my life where I get a handful of commencement invitations every year during this season. But this commencement speech didn't even take me a moment. I didn't have to check my schedule to see if there was a conflict. I jumped at the opportunity to be here. This is an institution that not only stands for something through its proclamation, but it stands for something by what it does every single day, not just for the students who are here, but for others. I believe in my heart, and I've said this publicly, that the slavery of the 1800s and before in America was a slavery of physical bondage, but that the slavery of today is a slavery of spiritual and intellectual bondage, where people are being cast into prisons of limited opportunities, chained and confined to small outcomes because they have not been given the opportunity to educate themselves, to have broad and ample pathways to empower their intellect and to bring it to bear in this world. This is a university that stands for those values, not just with the students we see here, but in communities like mine. The fact that you all are present in Newark, in a city that for too long has been disregarded, disrespected, or just plain dissed, the fact that you all are there means so much to me, but even more than that, the fact that you all are the leading provider of education in our prisons, to me shows me that you recognize the worth and the value and the dignity of every individual, and that ultimately you are liberators. And so let me begin just saying thank you for including me. Thank you for having me here on what is one of your more precious days of your life. I want to thank the trustees who are the caretakers of this university, whose stewardship makes days like this possible. I want to thank the faculty and staff who have not just mastered their subjects, but shown some of the deeper, more admirable traits of humanity in their caring and their compassion and their support and the discipline that they have brought to their students. I want to thank those people who often do not get thanked, the faces that are often first forgotten, the people who without work we would not be here today. Those are the secretaries and the assistants. Those are the people that prepare the food and serve it. Those are the people that clean the floors and clean the bathrooms. Those are the people that mow the grass and keep the grounds. They too deserve our thanks, our love, and our gratitude. And now I want to thank the families. It is your love that made today possible, your care packages, your calls, often your checks. And before I turn my attention to the graduates, allow me to thank the families for being here, not acting and behaving like my family did during my graduations. You see, my parents and relatives, cousins, uncles, aunts, and grandparents used to pack tents like this, showing up 5, 6, 7 hours before, reserving half of the tent. If it was a ticketed event, almost ruining my political career with the famous Booker ticket counterfeiting controversy. And then throughout the whole procedure, they would scream and yell my name at the most inappropriate moments imaginable. When the father was praying for the graduates, they would scream my name. At one point, thank you. We must be related. And then after the graduation was one of my most painful yet favorite moments. It's when I was besieged upon by the sea of family that was there, and I would hear from my 8th grade graduation to law school the same jokes over and over again. And the same stories. The jokes would come like this. Somebody would sidle up to me, often my granddad, and he'd say, "You see, boy, the tassel is worth the hassle." I say, "Yes, granddad, yes." And then my family, always being the first to try to keep my feet on the ground, would open the program, flip through the pages, and say, "You see, boy, I don't see you here as a magna cum laude or summa cum laude. I guess you were just, thank you, Lordy, I'm out of here." But then would come the advice. And I tell you, I would hear stories again and again, but always at the core, what I now reflect upon, it was the same advice. They wanted me to remember who I was no matter what happened, understand and know, as one of my relatives put it, that the degree you hold was paid for, not by you, but by the sweat, tears, sacrifice, and even blood of ancestors that you don't even know. They wanted me to fulfill the one obligation, stay true to myself, to be who I say I am, to live life with a courageous authenticity. Now, my father and mother, they lived these lessons for me every single day and infused them on me. In fact, I tease my dad to this day that now that I'm reached my 40s, I said, "Dad, you gotta stop. I've heard these stories now for 40 years, and I now see that the facts are changing every time you tell them. The stories are getting more dramatic and more difficult. I hear about your childhood, and if I ever say my dad was born poor, he'll heckle me and say, 'Boy, I wasn't poor. I was just po, P-O. I couldn't afford the other 2 letters. I don't know what you're talking about.'" And the stories in this small North Carolina town where he was born to a single mother, the weather just changed. First it was rain, then it was thunderstorms, then the hail period began. Hail the size of golf balls, eventually hail the size of small Cadillacs. And this Thanksgiving, I had to get into a fight with him and tell him, "Dad, I'm sorry, you were in the mountains of North Carolina. There's no way you could have experienced a tsunami in your town." And I have to tell you, though, my parents told me that same lesson for my graduations in so many ways. artfully, they put it to me that, son, never forget that you are the result of a conspiracy of love that goes deep into your background, people whose names you do not know. To cite my father's exaggerations, that is the truth. He was born to a single mom who could not take care of him. His mother then had to have his grandmother take care of him. Then his grandmother couldn't take care of him, and he was taken in by a town. I don't know the people's names from that small community, but they looked after him. They put a roof over his head. They put food on his table. And then when my father was able to get people encouraging him in school, it was time to go to college. He couldn't afford it and was just going to go work and not go to college. But people in that town whose names I do not know, that conspiracy of love, intervened with my dad, insisted that he apply to a small historically black college in North Carolina called North Carolina Central, and they said, we will give you the money. My dad tells me about dollar bills being put in envelopes. They gave him the money to pay his first semester tuition until he could find a job. I do not know these people's names, but I owe them my very existence. But that conspiracy of love continued. Last year, I had the honor of being the 50th reunion graduation speaker for my mom at Fisk University. And the night before, there was a dinner, and she took me around table to table. This was her 50th reunion, and she stopped me and introduced me to people at the tables. Oh, this person led our student voter registration drives when it was dangerous to go out and register people to vote, remembering Goodwin, Cheney, and Schwerner. She would say, this was the person who led our boycotts. This was the person who led our marches. It was almost like she was saying to me, boy, pay attention. You may not know these people's names, but they are part of that conspiracy of love that gave you life. They fought for you. They protested for you. They sweat and sacrificed for you. That conspiracy continued. My parents made it plain. They both graduated from college, ended up in Washington, D.C., at a time when blacks weren't being hired by many companies, but that conspiracy of love came together, black people and white people forming organizations like the Urban League, and suddenly my parents were the breakthrough generation. The first blacks hired by different companies. My father, one of the first blacks for Sinclair Oil, and one of the first blacks for a department store, and then the two of them became two of the first blacks hired in a new wave of African Americans working for this tech firm you guys might have heard of called IBM. And then the conspiracy continued to the town I grew up in. My parents in the late 60s, early 70s were looking for homes for their kids up in New Jersey, and they couldn't find any in white neighborhoods because real estate agents wouldn't show black families homes in white neighborhoods. But this conspiracy of love, people coming together through an organization called the Fair Housing Council, names I do not know, worked with my parents that when they went to a house and were told it was sold, they sent a white couple out behind them, Mr. and Mrs. Brown, but they were not brown, they were white, and the house would still be for sale. My parents finally found a home they loved. They were told it was sold. The Browns, when it was still for sale, they made a bid on the home. On the day of the closing, instead of the Browns showing up, my father showed up with a lawyer whose name I do not know, but I owe him so much. They marched into this real estate agent's office and said, you are in violation of New Jersey Fair Housing Council law. And before you knew it, the real estate agent stood up, didn't even finish listening to them, and punched my father's lawyer in the face and sigged a dog on my dad. Now, the size of the dog is up for some debate. My father insists it was Cujo. My mom will whisper to me and say, it was just Toto, Cory, it was just Toto. But literally months later, after a big court case, we moved into a small town in New Jersey, into a home that I grew up in. As my father would affectionately call us, the 4 raisins in a tub of vanilla ice cream. And that town was nurturing soil for me. I grew up strong and proud, and my parents would always tug at me when they saw me as a senior high school football All-American, when they saw me on the Honor Society. My dad would always tease me, boy, don't you walk around here like you hit a triple. You were born on third base, boy. And they would get serious.